What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own Fantasy Football Huddle presented by Danklyfe brand and yours truly, Dallas Clark. Today, we're getting into some of the most commonly seen mistakes from new players and veterans alike when it comes to drafts. Because as we all know, this is draft week. Preseason is all done before the regular season, and fantasy football season is right around the corner. If you haven't already even started one of your drafts, the majority of your fantasy football drafts will be going on over the next 7 days. And for that reason, I have tons of content coming out for you. I apologize for the slight lapse in my content over the last few days. I've been working a pretty cool side job over at the BMW Championships for the PGA Tour here in Castle Pines, Colorado, and it's been an incredible experience, but nothing will stop me from getting you the information that you need to hoist that championship over all those idiots in your fantasy football league this season. Speaking of fantasy football leagues, I want to extend you the invite to my fantasy football league this season. I'm doing at least one 12-man league for the Huddle Chat Sports Network. We're hoping to draft here this week, maybe Thursday or Friday, and if we have to push it to the weekend, we will. But I'm trying to fill out just a couple of more spots that are available in this league, so if you are interested, comment below. You also have to be a subscriber to the channel in order to be on the Huddle Chat Sports T-shirt showdown. Top 3 teams will get a t-shirt from the show, and there will be winnings for the top 3 performers throughout the season as well. But let's get all of that out of the way, and without further ado, let's get into the most commonly seen mistakes that you see in fantasy football drafts. But before we do that, make sure you like the content and smash that subscriptions bar. But let's fill up our cup, roll something up, and get right into the first very common mistake that you see in fantasy football drafts, which is just taking the number 1 wide receiver in a bad offense because he's the number 1 wide receiver. That does not make a player a viable option. Just being the best option on a terrible offense doesn't make you usable in fantasy football. The number 1 wide receiver in a bottom 5 offense in the NFL has failed to crack the top 24 wide receivers over the last 10 years. Just taking the worst wide receiver in the NFL because they're the best wide receiver on a team doesn't make them a viable fantasy football option. That's the first mistake. The next mistake that you commonly see is people taking kicker or defense inside of the top 10 rounds. I'm not a person that's always going to talk smack to anybody that doesn't wait until their last 2 rounds to draft kicker and defense. I mean, I know myself, I had the Baltimore Ravens defense last year, and not having to go through a defense and go through a season where you're having to stream and make that decision week in and week out, it was amazing having that stress-free approach. And if available, I will take that approach this year. But do not take a kicker within the first 10 rounds. Those picks are so valuable that if you're messing around and taking a kicker or a defense inside the top 10 rounds, you are missing out on too many good players. Nobody in your defense is going to jump on the San Francisco, or nobody in your league is going to jump on the Niners defense in the 8th round. You can wait a couple of rounds. Do not take that kicker or that defense inside of that first 10 rounds. The next mistake that you're going to commonly see is players that are being rostered that will clog your bench. Do not roster players that are just going to clog your bench at the end of your draft. When you're getting outside of those top 10 rounds, when you're trying to decide, on your kicker and your defense, plus those last few players that are going to be added in your bench. Don't just take somebody. Even handcuffs can clog up your bench. Somebody that you really are stuck with no matter how good they perform because you never plan on starting them, that is clogging your bench. What you want to do in those last few rounds is draft high upside players who may be the high priority waiver option through the first couple of weeks. You want to try to target those players that I'm going to be talking about weeks 1, weeks 2, maybe even week 3 when it comes to the waiver wire madness on Tuesday and Wednesday after that first and second week in the NFL season. You want upside that can present itself through the first couple of weeks. If you're taking those high upside players late in draft, you want to be able to have the opportunity to either start that player within the first 3 weeks or be willing to release that player in the first 3 weeks. Don't draft somebody just to keep them on your bench unless you maybe have a plan, a high value quarterback that you might be able to use on a bye week, something like that. There are certain excuses you can use to have a player clogging your bench, but at the end of the day, there are only so many roster spots that you have available to yourself, and don't use them on wasteful picks. The last mistake we're going to be making, that we're going to be talking about today, that you're not going to be making, is caring too much about bye weeks. This is not going to be your final roster, and that's something that you hear me say every season going into your fantasy football drafts. You're not drafting for the playoffs right now. You're not drafting for anything outside of starting your roster week 1. You do not need to worry about, do I have too many players on a week 10 bye before the first week even starts. By the time week 10 comes, you have no idea how many trades and how many waiver wire pickups you're going to make between now and then. And worst case scenario, if you pick a whole roster full of people that are on a bye week of week 10, if you can get the things done during the regular season, and you just have to chalk up an L on week 10 because nobody's going to be starting, well, then that's what you're going to have to do. I see too many fantasy football managers overly concerned about the bye weeks that their players have, and it really changes the opinions that they have of players that they really like and they really want to draft just because 2 wide receivers on their roster both have a bye week in week 11. Do not make these mistakes as a fantasy football player, whether you're new to the game or whether you're a veteran just making a return and trying to get your research and refresh for your fantasy football draft this week. Guys, I've got tons of content coming out to you, and like I said, I'm going to have even more coming out on the presses. It's midnight right now where I am at the recording of this video, and I'm coming out with as much content as I can in between this PGA Tour tournament, but do not worry, nothing is going to stop me from getting you the information you need to get that trophy over those idiots. And make sure that if you want to join the Fantasy Football League from the THC Sports Showdown, you comment below and let me know your interest, but you got to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Let's make sure you keep your chin up all the way and your attitude all the way down. I'm going to see y'all next time. Peace out, everybody.